Welcome to Pricing, Writing, Editing, Translation, and Other Services for the Corporate Market. This webinar will help you determine your annual revenue goals and hourly rate, and it will help you reply to requests for quotes. Before we begin, first a little bit about me. I'm a six-figure freelancer. I write marketing, website, and social media content for corporate clients, and I conduct writing webinars primarily for corporate clients, but occasionally for writing groups as well. You can learn more about me at my website, paullima.com. So, a little bit about the webinar. Pricing, writing, editing, translation, and other services for the corporate market will help you set annual revenue goals for your business, set your hourly service rate, and that's in a world where rates are all over the map, and it will help you reply to requests for quotes. Are you ready to change? If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. So nothing changes in your business until you change the way you do business. Nothing changes in the amount of revenue that you generate until you look at what you want to charge and perhaps change what you want to charge, the rate you want to charge. So where do we begin? How much do you want to earn? Do the math. How much do you want to earn per year? It's that simple. Pick a number and go for it. However, can your business generate that revenue? Different businesses generate different amounts. Similar businesses generate different amounts. I know writers who make more than I make, and I know writers who earn less than I make. Most businesses have a ceiling on what they earn. The ceiling depends on your hourly rate and how many billable hours you can work per week, and of course on what clients are willing to pay. So how much do you want to earn? I'm a six-figure freelance writer trainer. Admittedly, the six figures start with a 1, but the six figures do not include the numbers after the decimal point. I know writers, freelancers who are amazed by what I earn, and I know freelancers who scoff at what I earn. In other words, what you can earn is all over the map. It depends on what you want to charge and how many hours per week you can work. So how much to charge? Your rate can be elastic to a degree. Some companies have set price expectations, so if you work for them, what you charge doesn't matter. You earn their rate. Some companies pay more than others. So what are you doing to find companies that pay more than others? And some services are worth more than others. Writing marketing material, I would suggest to you, is worth more than editing a price list. I more than double my writing rate for when I conduct training for corporate clients. Your job, find clients in your target sectors that can pay your rate. That's your job. That's not what this webinar is all about, but you want to find clients in your target sectors that can pay your rate. You can earn a decent to solid living as a freelancer. Notice the asterisk beside solid living. It depends on how you define decent and solid living. In other words, if you want to become a millionaire and you're a freelance writer, you may be in the wrong business. But you can earn a decent to solid living. I've been doing it for 30 plus years. So how much do you want to earn? Pick your annual revenue target. Go ahead, pick a figure. And since this is just preliminary, pick any figure you want. Let's see what impact that figure has on the hourly rate you charge and the hours you need to work each week. Are you ready? Have you picked a figure? If so, let's go. So how much to charge? Do the math. How much do you want to earn per year? Divide your desired annual revenue by 50 weeks. I'm giving you 2 weeks off each year for good behavior, and that equals the amount you want to earn per week. The other thing to keep in mind is how many billable hours can you work per week. That will help you set your hourly rate. So let's look at that more concretely. As I said, I'm a six-figure freelancer, so $100,000 per year divided by 50 weeks equals $2,000 per week. That's my weekly goal. Some weeks I may earn more, some weeks I may earn less, but over the year, I should earn at least $2,000 per week. Now, I figure I can work about 20 billable hours a week. So divide $2,000 by 20 and you get my rate. I charge $100 per hour. Remember, billable hours are the hours you're working where you're getting paid. Billable hours do not include marketing or accounting or other such functions. They're the hours you work when you're getting paid. Knowing your hourly rate will help you quote on different jobs, whether you charge per hour, per project, per word, or per page. It all comes back to what's your hourly rate. Does $100 per hour seem too high or too low? That is my writing rate. Again, as I said, my training rate is more than double that figure. You need to set your rate based on your annual revenue goal and how many hours you feel you can work per week. So that's my rate. Doesn't mean it has to be your rate. How much to charge? Let's say you wanted to earn $50,000 per year. Divided by 50 weeks, that's $1,000 per week. Now, if you feel you can work 24 billable hours per week, you want to charge $40 per hour. I find that rate low. I know some writers who are charging $30, $35 per hour. They would say, oh, $40, that would be great. You have to come up with your rate, and I've just demonstrated how to do that. Doesn't mean you'll get your rate for every job. Some jobs you may get more, some jobs you may get less, but at least you know what you want to charge per hour. So let's look at, with that rate in mind, your rate in mind, pricing projects. Per project, define the scope of the project and issue a quote. We'll look at that in more detail. Per word, that can be used to quote on writing, editing, and translation. But again, how much are you going to charge per word? How long is it going to take you to write, edit, or translate the document? Times your hourly rate, and then you figure out a per word charge. Per page, that can be used to quote on editing and translation work. View a page first to ascertain the quality of the writing if you have to edit or translate. For instance, if you're an editor and you quoted a per page rate and the work you receive is an absolute mess, perhaps you have charged too little. So make sure you know what you're looking at. Pricing projects per hour. For complex projects involving multiple meetings, interviews, background research, and a lot of writing, plus complex approval process, revisions, work with designer, production companies, etc. For jobs like that, I want to charge per hour. It's too difficult to estimate it per project. So what I do is keep a detailed timesheet and I submit that with my invoice. So the client knows what my hourly rate's going to be, and the client gets the timesheet and they know exactly how I spent my time. They get the timesheet when I submit my invoice. But bottom line, no matter how you charge, you need a per hour rate to help you determine what you will quote. There are other fee considerations. Retainer. If put on retainer, that's a guarantee of a minimum number of hours per week. You might offer a discount on your hourly rate. Plus, you want to think about an advance. If you've never heard of a company or are in any way uncertain of their ability to pay, ask for an advance of 50 to 100%. If a small business I've never heard of asks me to do a writing job for them, I want 100% of the money in advance. If a company won't pay in advance, they might hedge on paying your invoice. So you want to get as much money in advance as you can. And if I can just go back to retainer for a moment, you might be put on a retainer for 10 hours a week over a 3-month period. And that means even if you only work 8 hours in a week, you get paid for the 10 hours. In other words, you are available to your client for at least 10 hours a week. So now you know what you want to charge. You've got to estimate your quote. And when I'm asked to quote on a project, I come up with 3 estimates based on a minimum, maximum, and mid time or hours per task. So I look at initial briefing. How long are we going to have to talk? Will there be meetings I have to attend? Reading of background information. How long will that take me? Will I be interviewing sources? How many? How long do I feel it will take me? Remember, I'm looking at minimum, mid, and maximum for each point. Other research I may have to do. Will I have to transcribe my notes, my tape, organize material, write my outline for the job, consult with the client based on the outline, write a first draft, consult with the client, revise the document, consult with the client, perhaps revise it again. Will I be working with the photographer or designer, editing and proofreading the job? I come up with the total hours times my rate, and that equals my per project rate. So think about what you have to do and come up with your rate for the job based on what you have to do. And in a moment, we'll look at why I come up with 3 potential rates for a job. You need to estimate your quote. Before issuing your quote, you should ask, how should you position the quote? Is this a per hour job, per word, per page, per project? How will the client view the max, mid, and minimum prices? You want to think about that. How many quotes is a client receiving? Ask if the client is getting multiple quotes. If they are, perhaps you come in at your mid or your minimum rate because you're going to be competing with other writers. How urgent is the deadline? Is the client calling you Thursday and need the work by Tuesday? Is this the Thursday of Labor Day weekend? So there's a degree of urgency. If the client says, yeah, over the next few months I will need, less urgent. How important is the work to the client's bottom line? Think about that. Again, are you writing a price list? Are you producing detailed and important marketing information? How important is the job to you? Are you busy? Do you have no work at all? Do you have room for a little bit of work? And how would you feel if you landed the job at the minimum, mid, or maximum quote? You come up with your minimum, and if you say, gee, if I get this job at my minimum quote, I wouldn't feel very good. If I get it at the mid or maximum quote, I'd feel okay with it. So in other words, I am never unhappy when I land a job. No matter what rate I quote, I believe it's the right rate for me. So with all that in mind, you decide how much to quote. For instance, and we're not going to go into great detail here, but perhaps you're being asked to produce a newsletter, 4-page newsletter, 5 articles, 450 to 600 words each, plus a headline, subheadline. You'll be background reading and sourcing information for each article. You'll be writing the article in plain English. Each article will be reviewed by someone, and you will revise as required. Think about that and come up with an estimated time and come up with your quote. Just an exercise you can try after the webinar. Media release. Maybe you're being asked to write a media release for Canadian Actor Online. It's a real company, but it is no longer online. Chat about an event the CAO is promoting. You chat to the CAO founder on the phone. You visit the company website, and then you have to quote on the media release, which consists of headline, subheadline, body copy about 600 words, a paragraph about the company, and contact information. You'll be doing one revision after a second phone discussion with the CAO director. CAO will issue the media release. You will not be sending it out. So think about that. Come up with a quote. What would your quote be? So it's good to practice quoting on jobs before you actually have to do it. So you have to know your hourly rate, you have to define the scope of the project, and then you have to come up with a quote. And once you do that, you have to reply to the RFQ, or request for quote, or RFP, request for proposal. Now, your reply can cover a myriad of topics. How formal, informal, legalistic a person are you? How informal, formal, or legalistic is your client? I tend to be a rather informal person, but when I'm replying to requests for quotes, I send out a comprehensive email, as opposed to contracts that clients review and get their lawyers to review, and I get my lawyer to review, etc. The more formal you are, or your client is, the more detailed your reply should be. The higher the stakes, the more formal the reply. In other words, if you're writing and coordinating the annual report for a publicly traded Fortune 1000 company, you may actually want a lawyer to create or vet a formal contract. So you cross your T's, you dot your I's, everything is covered. Most of the projects that I do not require that degree of formality. Only you can decide. So what does your reply to an RFQ cover? Project parameters, number of meetings, background research, your exact role. Who coordinates what with whom? Who will you be working with? Project deliverables. What do you have to deliver? The number of pages, of the word count, the tone, the style, the file type you send the client. If you're writing website content, do you have to design the website? That's a whole other aspect of a job. Do you just send a Word file and they get a designer to do it? How many revisions do you think the job will take? The schedule, deadlines for completing the research, the interviews, outline, first draft, second draft, final draft. So you take all of this in mind and you make sure your reply to the request for quote covers it. The fee, what are you charging? The amount and what it covers. Will there be meetings, research, interviews, your deliverables, revision, any other work under the project detail or deliverables you have to do? Make sure that's clear in your reply to the request for quote. And I'll show you an example in a minute. Will there be expenses, out-of-pocket expenses, long-distance calls, travel, supplies, accommodation? What's the approval process if you're going to be incurring such expenses? If you're going to be incurring expenses, make sure your reply to the request for quote spells out what the expenses are. Invoicing. When, who, and how to invoice. When do you invoice, who do you invoice, how do you invoice, and when do you get paid? Make sure you know all that information up front. What about errors and admissions and indemnity? Who is responsible for final approval? Are there penalties if there are errors or omissions in your work? And this is just me, let my clients know they are responsible for final approval. They are responsible for final fact-checking. They are responsible to make sure there are no errors or omissions. But if you don't make that clear beforehand, and there is a mistake in the work you produce, the client may come back and say, we're not paying you. Even worse, we're suing you. So you want to make sure you've got that covered. Copyright, who owns it? Generally, the company does when you're doing corporate work. But if your work for the company is going to appear in a newsletter or on a website with your byline, you want to make sure you clarify the matter. Who owns the work? Again, for corporate work, in most cases, they own the work. You are doing work for hire, you give it to them, and you never see it again. So, sample reply to request for quote. Thank you for the opportunity to bid on ABC Inc.'s white paper, editing and writing project. My quote is based on the following criteria as discussed. Meetings and phone interviews, 4 hours. Read documents, make notes on document structure, consistency, and editing requirements, 2 hours. Edit the document with emphasis on the FAQs and glossary, 8 to 10 hours. Research and write 2 additional sections for the document, approximately 500 words each as discussed, 12 to 15 hours. Revise the document once based on client feedback, 2 to 4 hours. Total estimated time is up to 35 hours. The reply continues. My quote is $3,000, an advance of $1,000 due upon acceptance of the quote. Note, again, this is in the reply, this quote does not include any approved out-of-pocket expenses or any work beyond the scope of the project as defined. For instance, should I be asked to research and write additional sections of the documents or attend more than one meeting, I would bill you at $90 per hour. Such work will not commence without prior approval. Should the project be terminated before it is completed, I would bill you $90 per hour for any work done. And here I said I was not a terribly formal person, but that sounds like a very formal paragraph, and I think it's important that you spell out what you'll be doing and you let the client know if they require more work, if they change their mind, they need to pay for it. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or call. Either you land the quote and start the work, either you land the job and start the work, or you don't. Move on, look for more work. It's as simple as that. Now you'll notice in that reply to the request for quote, I put the hours in the quote. Some clients want to know how long and how much. I prefer to only answer how much, in other words, per project. But if the client wants to know how long, I'm prepared to answer both. If you estimate a job might take about 30 hours, build in a contingency fee, especially when issuing quotes for larger complex jobs. So you think this job should take 30 hours, but I'm going to quote based on 35 hours. Hey, and if it comes in at 28 hours and you've quoted per project, you keep the difference. If you go over a few hours, you absorb that, unless you're timesheeting and charging per hour. So let's do a few Q&As. Should I charge different rates for writing, editing, and proofreading? I charge the same rate for everything I do other than training. That doesn't mean you should. Only you can determine what you're going to charge for which services. If I'm asked to write and edit a project, I charge the same rate. I'm not a terribly good proofreader. You probably find typos in my PowerPoint here, so I sometimes farm out the proofreading for complex jobs. I know writers who charge less for editing and editors who charge one rate for editing and another for proofreading. In short, what you charge is up to you. So I'm not suggesting you charge my rates or that you charge the way I charge. I am suggesting you need to know how you're going to charge. Question: are there different rates for large cities and smaller centers? Answer: rates are all over the map no matter where the clients are located. Small businesses tend to pay lower rates. Companies in small towns may expect lower rates, but there are some large companies in smaller towns. Your job, know what you want to earn and find clients willing to pay that rate. So there can be different rates. That doesn't mean you have to charge different rates. I have what I call my Fortune 500 rate. I do have a different rate for smaller businesses, and I have a rate for writing associations as well. But I am happy with the rates I charge for different client groups. You need to determine your rate. I know writers who wouldn't come down on their rate one iota. So what will we look at next? Let's look at this question. Many entrepreneurs cannot afford standard hourly rates. What is the best way to handle this? And allow me to say there are a number of charities that can't afford standard hourly rates either. If you have no work and the only way you can land a gig is by lowering your rates, discount your rate, but let the client know you're discounting it. Early on in my career, I have sent invoices that said, this job is $750, discount of 25%, small business discount or charitable discount of 25%, and then the bottom line in my invoice. But also, while I was doing that, I spent more time looking for better paying clients. Question: when working on a long-term project, do you work for a lower hourly rate? If I'm on retainer, as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, say a guarantee of 10 hours per week for at least 2 or 3 months, I offer a 15% discount. Again, a retainer means you're guaranteed a minimum number of hours. If the client doesn't produce the work for you, you still get paid. So if your retainer is for 15 hours and you only work 12 hours one week, you still get paid for 15. At the same time, if you work 18 hours, then you charge for the additional hours. Basically, what it means is you or that client is your priority. You are working for them at least X number of hours per week. Question: I have trouble conceptualizing the time involved for projects. Is there a good rule of thumb for estimating time? Answer: welcome to the most difficult part of freelancing other than the work. It's the quote. Before issuing a quote, review the estimating a writing job chart, which we saw earlier in this webinar. Devise a similar chart for your business. Jot down your estimated hours per item, add them up, and go from there. If you land the gig but underestimated your quote, live and learn. Experience is a great teacher. There were some jobs I've done where I probably worked twice the amount of time that I estimated early in my career. Now I'm pretty good to within a couple of hours for a job. So it's your job to manage the process. You start with a detailed RFQ, but make sure you know, is your first contact your prime or project contact? In other words, who you're going to be talking to. Who else do you talk to? Under what circumstances? Will you be interviewing multiple sources? Has the scope of the job changed since you issued your quote? Corporate clients are notorious for changing the scope of the job, so make sure you cover yourself in your reply to the request for quote. Who signs off? Who manages the approval process? You want to know who that person is. What rights are being purchased? Again, generally it's all rights when you're doing corporate work. Contract, purchase order, confirmation letter required. You need to receive something from the client. When and who do you invoice to get paid? What happens if the project is canceled? Have you addressed that issue in your reply to the request for quote? What are the deliverables? A Word file, PowerPoint, PDF, HTML, that's website copy, etc. What is the objective or the purpose of the writing? What are you trying to achieve for the client? I want to know that so that I can try to achieve that for the client. Who is the target market? Personal, consumer demographics, and any other pertinent information. Business demographic and other pertinent information. Knowing who I'm writing for influences the tone and style I write. You need to know that up front. What impression does your client want to make with the target market? Do they want to be perceived as a fun-loving company, a serious company? How do they want to be perceived by the target market? That influences the tone of your writing. What action, if any, does your client want the reader to take? You need to know that, so when you're writing, you can make sure you request that specific action. What overall tone style of writing is desired? Due dates for the outline, first draft, second draft. that's not so much about pricing, but it is about managing the process. And a lot of that information you want to make sure you include in your reply to your request for quote. It also helps you determine your estimate. So with all of that in mind, I hope you enjoyed the pricing webinar, and I hope you will indulge me a brief commercial message. I've written a dozen books on writing and the business of freelance writing that might be of interest to you. You can read about them at my website, www.paullima.com/books. But if you don't mind, I will show you the books. Everything you want to know about freelance writing, how to develop article ideas and sell them to newspapers and magazines, and how to find and price and manage corporate writing assignments. That's in one book. The Six-Figure Freelancer is a book just for those who want to write for corporate clients, how to find, price, and manage corporate writing assignments. Business of Freelance Writing is a book just for people who want to write for newspapers and magazines. Copywriting That Works, if you want to write promotional copy and you feel you need to brush up on your promotional writing, this book includes bright ideas to help you inform, persuade, motivate, and sell. I use it for University of Toronto continuing education course on copywriting. Fundamentals of Writing, how to write articles, media releases, case studies, blog posts, and social media content. The book does what the title says, shows you how to write all of that. How to write a nonfiction book in 60 days. Hey, if you feel you've got a book in you and it's nonfiction, my book on how to write a nonfiction book in 60 days may help you produce the first draft, a solid first draft of your book in 60 days. Harness the business writing process. If you need to write email, letters, proposals, reports, media releases, and web content, that's what the book covers. If you're a creative writer and you feel blocked, Unblock Writer's Block might be of interest to you. It includes over 70 writing exercises to get you started and keep your writing. And a final book, MS and Me, From First Signs to Diagnosis to Living with a Chronic Illness. MS is something I've had for 20 years, and I've written a book about it. Again, all the books are available in print, PDF, Kindle, and EPUB formats, and you can read more about them online at paullima.com/books. Thank you for listening to and watching my webinar. I hope you found it informative, interesting, and perhaps even a bit entertaining. All the best with pricing writing projects.